Well, we're going to finish off today with a Q&A session with Nicola and Gerry. Just check that we've got them both back online. Have we got
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm here.
Right. Lovely. Okay. So I don't know whether either of you dipped in or heard any of that, but you can hear the amazing enthusiasm from these from everybody, regardless of where they come from. And actually, I just popped something into the chat. You don't have to do this, but it would be helpful to know if you want to identify where you work. Some of you have done it already, but in addition to your name, just add what where you work. Don't worry if you don't want to do that, but it sort of just helps us see the spread of organisations that are involved here. I have a couple of questions that came up earlier in the chat, but the point of this session really is for you to openly ask questions relating to Nicola and Gerry's talks. But I also would like to encourage you to quiz them on how they got to be where they are, or any tips that they might have in mentoring and coaching and helping all of you guys see your way into leadership positions. Now, I will guess, judging by the tone of the conversations that we've been having, that your route to leadership positions may actually be quite different from Gerry and Nicola's. We'll see, but I'm sure they have some tips. We'll have some tips, and we'll be happy to share them with you. So the first question, I think Nicola might have answered already, but there was a question from Gonzalo Silva. Any plant viral disease of concern in the UK currently? And you mentioned that surveillance is very expensive, so any ideas how to make it more affordable? Would you be willing to expand on that, Nicola, please?
Yeah, sure. So I sort of put a note in the chat. I mean, there are some viruses of concern at the moment, particularly in protected edibles, like tomato brown fruit rugose virus, tomato chlorosis virus. Viruses are very important in other crops. So, there are lots of disease management strategies to manage them, but perhaps also to mention one that's on our sort of high priority list to keep out is the rosette virus. And I think we've got Ines on the call, haven't we, who's been doing a PhD on this with the RHS and Newcastle and Ferrer. So, where we have identified high priorities, we will try and do some research, get a student, get ahead of the game so that we can be ready. I mean, I've got a background in plant virology, so that's sort of an area close to my heart, but it's also important to control the vectors of viruses. So we tightly regulate things like Bemisia and thrips so that we can keep the vectors out as well. On surveillance, we are investing in satellite technologies. We've been working with a spin out from the Harwell Space Agency called Resitech, and they've been mapping tree canopies and trying to look for indicators of disease. So that work's looking very promising. And last summer we had a BSPP undergraduate student who came to work with us in DEFRA to analyse some of the data for us. He was actually a geographer, and he came and spent a few weeks working with us on one of the lockdown bursaries to help us analyse that data. So, we're always looking for kind of new technologies, new tools that can help us do our job more efficiently.
Okay, thank you. We've got a raised hand from Sarah. Sarah Lopez, go on. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
I was asking about how do you think that is in communication with academia, in the case that academia is planning research projects that can solve some of the problems that are here. So if they think that the communication is good and how this can be improved. Thank you.
Did you hear?
I think, yes, shall I start and then
Yeah.
Gerry might want to come in. I think the question was about communication with scientists to sort of, and I think this is really important. I spend quite a lot of my time talking to scientists because, you know, we have an incredible plant science base here in the UK. It's international. So I find it really inspiring to talk to scientists and to share our policy challenges with them. So we do that through different ways. We have sort of forums where we bring scientists together to talk about a particular challenge. For example, you know, we've got a long-standing ash dieback group that we bring together to look at, you know, what are the research challenges, what are the policy challenges to come up with programs. Obviously we commission research from people as well, but you know, it's definitely a co-design, if you like, of kind of researchable projects, so that and you know, we're incredibly lucky at DEFRA that we've got fantastic scientists who really want to work on the problems that we face. So, and I think particularly after ash dieback, quite a lot of people who'd never worked on trees before, but had skills in, you know, genomics, diagnostics, epidemiology, were quite motivated to work with us to solve, you know, this really challenging problem. And that's given us a really good basis now to have positive relationships with scientists. We fund studentships, we fund research projects, and we want to work very closely with the science community. Gerry might want to mention what happens in Scotland as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. So it's similar, really. So the Scottish Government, through something called its Strategic Research Programme, really sort of funds, as a major funder, really, of institutes such as the James Hutton Institute in Dundee, and also SRUC, Scotland's Rural College. So there's quite a lot of money, actually, is specifically earmarked, really, for plant health and plant pathology. On top of that, the government also goes into partnerships with the research councils, really, and there's obviously a major initiative on at the moment looking at bacterial plant pathogens. And then similarly, there's also quite a lot of joint funding initiatives with the levy bodies such as AHDB Potatoes in particular, really. So again, you know, it's a fair point, and I think it's something that as Nicola says, that we have a strong research base within the UK, and both of us are working quite hard to sort of maintain that, really, because that we recognise, and the politicians that we work for recognise the significance of plant health.
Excellent. Thank you both. And I've just realised I'm supposed to be taking these questions through the chat because we are recording this. So thank you, Sarah, for doing that. But I will move now on to the other questions through the chat. So we got one from Jassy, which is to both of you. And this is, are there any preconceptions about leadership that you now realise are not true? Do you want to start that, Gerry?
Okay, yeah. You know, I suppose when I was doing my PhD and maybe my first postdocs and things like that, I used to think that the head of department was some genius that knew everything, really. And I suppose that now I suppose that maybe people look to me in that sort of position. I realise actually how little I actually do know, really. So I think that certainly that was one of the preconceptions which is evaporated for me. That at the end of the day, really, I think all of us can only keep so much in our heads at any one time, really. So, and we shouldn't expect too much out of our leaders. maybe it's easy for me to say that. Really.
Yeah. Anything to add, Nicola?
No, I would echo that. You know, leaders aren't the ones that know everything or necessarily the kind of the smartest people. I think leaders have a range of skills that, you know, they develop through experience and, you know, through commitment to, you know, certain behaviors and things like that. So, you know, I think everyone can be a leader. It depends what you want to lead and what motivates you.
Yeah, that's I think the They've all had that right at the beginning. Everyone here to believe that they're going to be a leader, at least for these 3 days. So,
I mean, I think one thing that I think has always been important to me is that to think of every skill you have, every experience that you have, that that makes you, that you take that with you throughout your life, in your job, in your sort of private life, in your personal life. So whatever you do, it adds to who you are as a person. And actually then suddenly you realize, gosh, I've done all of these things. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be able to now take this next step forward. So, always grasp every opportunity you can, because you can take that experience and that skill with you and, take it wherever you want to go.
Yes, that's really good advice. Thank you. So a question from Jonathan Burton, and this is about, it's now the International Year of Fruit and Vegetables. Will this be highlighted in the UK from government and linked to plant health, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's a follow-on, isn't it, from International Year of Plant Health? I mean, I personally am a massive advocate of the importance of fruit and vegetables in global diets, and they can have a massive impact. So working with my team, we established a national committee for International Year of Plant Health. So we're going to be working with those partners to see how can we extend those messages into International Year of Fruit and Veg. And I think we're going to be establishing various activities this year, which again can highlight the importance of fruit and veg, get diseases and pests as well. So, what are the positive messages that we can share about that?
And certainly in Scotland, that obviously there's a big initiative on at the moment, looking at farmer-led groups to come up with programs really to help us sort of meet our climate change targets. And within that, one of the drivers would probably be to try and increase the hectareage of leguminous crops that are produced here. So there's quite a lot of tie-ins really in terms of the future direction really of arable agriculture in the country. So I do think that it's an important initiative, and it's one that we support as well.
Excellent, thank you. And then we've one from Adeline Sordil from Tropic Biosciences, which sounds an interesting institution. I don't know anything about it. Perhaps Adeline will tell us later. But it highlights the question, which is difficult, is how do you reconcile the difficulty for farmers in protecting plants but using fewer pesticides and fewer chemicals?
Do you want me to
Gerry?
start then?
Yeah,
it's a really difficult area, and there's a lot of tension really sort of in some of these debates. For example, there's been a chemical which has been used fairly widely really for potato cyst nematode Vidate, which has just recently been withdrawn. And similarly, another chemical that's been used in the forestry nursery sector really called Basamid really is a soil sterilant. So I think the problem that we have really in trying to get the balance right is trying to balance the needs of production also with sort of protecting the environment and also human health. So I think that the way that we're going to attempt to do this in Scotland is to hold regular meetings really with the across the sector, so agriculture, horticulture, forestry, but also bring in our colleagues really sort of so in Scotland it's Nature Scot, so the environmental protection arm of the Scottish Government, to try and get the discussion going, because I think that we really have to find a way to if you like, to sort of break that them and us sort of position that seems to have arisen really on this area by getting the dialogue going and for people to sort of understand. On top of that, I think that it's undoubtedly the case that we are on a trend in which the portfolio of active ingredients really is being reduced. And as a result of that, I think that we have to plan ahead in terms of putting more money into IPM research or biocontrol. So I do think that there has to be a more joined up approach to this. There has to be better dialogue. But I think we're certainly at the first stages really of improving this situation. But it is going to be a long, hard road really. So I mean, I think it's a fair point and something that we're working on.
Yeah, I would agree with Gerry. Research is really important here. But actually, I would say that, many of the pests and diseases that we're having to deal with, that I mentioned in my talk, are tree pests and diseases. And basically, for those, really, there are no chemicals, there are no pesticides. There has been no investment by companies because they don't see an economic benefit. It's not like you can sell a product for sort of huge hectareage of cereals, etc. So really, research solutions are the only way for us. So we've been investing in, for example, research on a parasitoid to control oriental chestnut gall wasp, which is a pest of sweet chestnut. So we've been working on this for some time, again with universities, and we're about to release a non-native parasitoid to suppress oriental chestnut gall wasp. We've been through all of the risk assessment, acre, etc. I think there are 1 or 2 hurdles still, but that's an example of where we had a new invasive pest. We can't eradicate it. There's nothing to control it, but actually there is a parasitoid, and now we're going to look and see whether or not that gives us, enough suppression. So investing in things like that. For ash dieback, we've been investing in research on genomics and tolerance. So trying to find different solutions to manage these pests, and obviously that's going to be better for the environment, because controlling tree pests in triple SIs, in sensitive habitats, in areas where there's a lot of public access is really, really challenging.
Thank you both. Moving on then, we've got one from Alan McCluskey. Is there a glass ceiling in plant health for those who have not completed a PhD and then postdoctoral work?
Interesting. Well, I mean, certainly in government, we employ a whole range of people. We employ people with PhDs. We employ people that have come through the inspectorate route, who may have a first degree or may have come through an apprenticeship. So I think there are many different routes to develop your career. And I think particularly for plant health, because there are very few universities that we don't get ready-made plant health specialists through universities. People have to go through different routes. I studied botany, but you can't study pure botany anywhere in the UK now. So that pathway is not linear. So in terms of opportunities, I mean, we've just recruited nearly 300 plant health and seeds inspectors, and we've taken people from a very wide range of backgrounds, and some of them will really want to be operational. Some of them may end up going into science. Some of them may end up in my policy teams, and actually there are options then to move about. So I don't see any barriers really to that sort of development. I mean, I know that we actually recruited someone who'd come from another organisation who didn't have a PhD, and they felt that there was a barrier to their progression in that organisation. They came on a secondment to us just to see what it was like working in government, and now actually, they've now got a permanent role with us. So I would say, follow your passion, follow the opportunities, and don't necessarily think in a linear way for your career development.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think it depends what you want to do. I think is probably the answer to that question, really. But I certainly feel in government, really, and that it's not a prerequisite.
No.
Obviously, I think in academia, then I think it's a different ball game, really. But I definitely feel in government is not a prerequisite. And I think that if you're committed to continuing sort of lifelong learning, really, sort of, it is possible to do whatever you like within government, really. So I definitely, if that's your chosen route, and Alan, I'm assuming it is since you work at SASA, I don't think it's in any way a disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you both. I think I fully support both of those views too. Question here from Katrina Dainton. What are your thoughts on how the increasing tree planting targets might impact pest and disease risks in the UK?
Well, absolutely. I think, this is a major priority for governments in England, Scotland and Wales. And in DEFRA, we have a tree planting programme. And actually, I sit on that programme board. So we've recognised the importance of biosecurity in, making plans for tree planting. So I sit alongside forestry colleagues to make sure that we have a strategy in place to either to a combination of increasing nursery production in the UK to meet the targets, but also, where we do have to import trees, making sure that that's done in a biosecure way. So, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the environment, for climate mitigation, and also benefits for sort of social well-being to be planting more trees or having strategies for more regeneration. But biosecurity is at the heart of that strategy. And I know in Scotland, Gerry, you're way ahead of us. You're planting more trees than we are in England. So I'm sure you're involved in that as well.
Sure. So in Scotland, actually, I think the target for this year, which I'm pretty sure has been met, or last year, was 12,000 hectares of forestry has been planted, with a view that over the next few years it will go up to 18,000. So yes, it is a concern as to where some of that planting material comes from. But as Nicola said, that is a whole systems approach to this. So the plan would be that we also increase our tree nursery capacity, really, as well. And I do think actually maybe one of the things that we probably need to look at is the way that we procure for major infrastructure projects. So like, for example, in Edinburgh, or just outside Edinburgh, the Fourth Crossing, really, there's a lot of tree planting that went into that. There's also a major road building project at the moment, the A9, which basically goes from Stirling, sort of central Scotland, all the way up to Inverness. And again, there's a huge amount of tree planting. So if we can ensure that when the procurement for those trees that go into those projects really sort of are, if you like, locally grown and sourced, really, then I think that definitely is part of the whole process, really, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our ambition, is that that will be written into government procurement contracts, that trees for major planting should be safely sourced, either locally grown or UK sourced and grown, or grown under the Plant Healthy Assurance Scheme.
Excellent. So I think there are 3 more questions that we'll take. So we're probably just under 5 minutes left. So we'll do the 3 questions and succinct answers if possible. One from earlier, I think is it Nisa Larkamaya? The question is, have the GB and Scottish governments thought about the One Health approach in order to connect plant health to other human and environmental issues?
Yes, I suppose is the answer to that question, really. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that, and certainly in Scotland, we work very closely, really, with our colleagues in animal health, really. And to be honest, I suppose it's fair to say that the link out to human health is probably not so strong, but then our colleagues to animal health link out to them better. So there is definitely a sort of a spectrum, really, of shared experience, really. So yeah is the answer to that question.
Yeah, and we contributed to the UK antimicrobial resistance strategy, and particularly in some parts of the world, antibiotics are used on plants, on crops, on citrus. In the USA, the USDA have licensed 2 human antibiotics for citrus production because of citrus greening. So we are concerned about that. We've been doing some work with the FSA and FERA to monitor antibiotics in certain sort of imported fruit and vegetables to monitor the situation. But I think it's something that, you know, will become more important.
Thank you. One from Emily Stratford. What about climate change and resulting abiotic stress effects on plant health? And who is focusing on this area of plant health?
Yeah, well, we know that this is very important. So the risk register that I talked about in my talk, you know, we always look at the climatic aspects of this when we're assessing risk. So we'll do Climex modelling. You know, we work closely with the Met Office. We will look at the various scenarios when assessing what is the risk that a pest could establish, to what extent, you know, how far north could it go, and obviously looking at the kind of climatic conditions across the UK to understand, you know, could it establish in the south of England, would it reach Scotland, etc. So all of that's really important in factoring in our risk assessment and also part of our monitoring. And we have seen the extent to which pests spread affected by climate, or, you know, the speed at which they can complete their life cycle. And I think this is a focus for the Centre for Plant Health in Scotland as well, Gerry, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I suppose if in the news this week, I suppose, was the first finding of the brown marmorated stink bug, really. So the Plant Health Centre's already done some work, really, looking at how it would be able to establish in Scotland, and certainly using climate change models. I think the general feeling is that it's probably not, we don't really have the climate suitable at present, but maybe in decades to come it may do. And then clearly, I suppose we grow a lot of fruit under protection, and there's a possibility that if it was to get into those sort of production systems, that could cause us problems. So yeah, it's something that I think increasingly is being factored into all of our risk assessments as to the climate change. And I suppose, you know, taking Phytophthora ramorum as an example, the fact that the west of Scotland really is becoming wetter really probably is a major indicator of the fact that we're going to have increasing problems with ramorum going forward.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll finish on the last question, which is quite simply, does GM provide a solution? And I will see what your comments are on that. I think Nicola might have frozen.
Well, you know, that's a really it's a really difficult question for me to answer, really, being an employee of the Scottish Government. The official line is that our government doesn't believe it should be a technology which is used in the future. My personal view is slightly different, I think, but you know, so I think that it has to be in the mix, really, going forward, really. But I think that clearly, and I suppose that's listening in on some of your early discussions, you know, science doesn't exist in a vacuum. We have to take into account social science, how society feels about this. So I completely respect and understand the views of my politician masters, really, but scientifically, I think it has to be in the mix in terms of the technology we use in the future to improve the efficiency, really, of plant production.
Thank you. We've run out of time, so that debate could go on, but we have run out of time. So thank you to Nicola and Gerry. I hope Nicola didn't just get booted out, but thank you, because I think that was a very instructive and very helpful session for the Q&A. I think a little round of applause is, you know, there's a few hands coming up there. And thank you to everybody again for wonderful, wonderful engagement this afternoon. Really, this is such an enjoyable time for, I feel, I do hope you're getting something from it as well.